I do mention in this video a few times that I would supply the torque specs. But unfortunately, it's been a long time since I've done this job, so I do not have the printed out torque specs, so you'll have to find those on your own. I do mention them verbally a number of times in the video, so if you pay close attention, you go ahead and use those torque specs. One thing I will definitely mention is to be very, very, very careful of where you get your torque specs, because I have found a bunch of misinformation that will definitely damage threads in your engine. So keep that in mind.
One thing to make special note or make note of is there's a fuel line here that you got disconnect. So now you're going to need a fuel line disconnect. So there's a little red clip over here, just pops off. That you can pretty much pop off by hand. And once you pop this little red clip off, you're going to need some sort of fuel line removal tool. I bought this set of these plastic jobs at Harbor Freight. They're a little bit of a pain in the butt because you've got to really stretch it, but it does flex and stretch right over. You got to give it a pretty good stretch to get it on the line. You know, if you want to spend a few more bucks, you can get the metal ones with the hinge over here. But then this little gizmo just pops in there. Just give it a little push, and that's it. Fuel line pops right off. And there we are. So fuel line disconnected. All right, and now on to the more trivial stuff. Now these, I guess they're vacuum lines. These little tabs actually pull outward. I'd forgotten actually, it works best if you push them in a little bit harder and pull them out. Got this white one out successfully. That's the top one. Unfortunately, I did break the bottom one, the green one, because I didn't. It was just hooked in there, and I was just not careful enough, and I cracked it pulling it out. So I'm gonna have to get another one of those. All right. And now we get this vacuum hose here. Well, again, it looks like a large vacuum hose, goes to some sort of a transponder of some sort. This one's got a little gray tab, so on the back side down under, you'll feel a little bit of it sticking out a little bit. You pick up on that, and that flexes it up and releases, so it just slides right off. So this one's the same thing. Tiny little tab, pull on it, releases, should slide right off. And there it goes. So that's the, this is the little tab that you have to pull on right here in order to get that to release. You can see that right there. All right. At this point, I've got the intake manifold and both valve covers off. The only main advice I can share with this portion of the teardown is getting an intake manifold off was a little bit tricky because of these two little water hoses. Here's the intake manifold up on its side. These two water hoses over here, which, oh, sorry, those are the fuel lines, sorry. These two water hoses over here, see the two small ones there at the back, these are the heater core hoses, and these two small hoses were a little bit of a bear to get off. I will show you where those are. Those are back here. You'll see here's the heater hoses, and let me get some light up around here. There's the heater hoses, and you'll see the two small hoses right below over there. Getting those off is a little bit of a pain in the buttocks. We've got to get those clips. I oriented them up. They were actually oriented on the bottom, so a heck of a time getting to them. Other than that, everything was kind of pretty straightforward. Just kind of take things apart, take things apart, take things apart. And I have the spark plugs actually all left them all in there so nothing falls in the hole, but I've got them loosened up completely. Reason being, when I get everything apart, I want to be able to turn the motor over with a wrench as easily as possible. I think I've actually dodged a bullet here. You know, my whole point of going in here was to actually change the water pump. Well, while I'm at it, I don't want to go in there and not do everything else. So I actually have everything on the front of the motor on order. I'm going to be sharing those parts. I'll have them at the front of the video and at the back of the video. I'm changing every sprocket, every chain, every tensioner, and every runner. And as you can see, I really wasn't even aware of this, but look at this chain. Now, granted, that's going down to the water pump. I don't know how much of that slop is because of the water pump, but I don't know that I've ever seen a chain with that much slop in it. Even at the top over here, that's not a good fitting chain. So again, I think I've kind of dodged a bullet over here. I've got 180,000 miles on this car, though, predominantly highway miles. But it goes to show 180K is kind of pushing it for the timing chains on these 3.5 EcoBoosts. All right, the next thing I'm going forward with that on the other next section of the video is going to be pulling this motor mount off and then tearing the cover off of the front of here so I can access all these chains and sprockets on the front of the motor.
All right, here's a piece of information that might be handy for most. As far as getting a harmonic balancer puller off, I had borrowed I went to O'Reilly's and AutoZone to try and find a 3-jaw puller, and I had their regular 5-ton 3-jaw puller. Well, it wouldn't articulate because of the shape of the arms. It wouldn't go in there and grab the harmonic balancer. And then I noticed AutoZone does rent out, as you can actually see the part number over here, 57139. It's a Chrysler harmonic balancer puller. So it doesn't actually specify Ford on it anywhere over there, and I looked online and there were GM and Chrysler harmonic balancer pullers that kind of popped up, but I figured I'd give this a whirl, and that actually looks like it fits perfectly. So there's a little rod. You don't even have to worry about damaging threads. So there's a rod, and they have these different length rods for different lengths, and I think I grabbed the let's see, what is it? I think it was the middle rod. Actually, yes, there's 4 rods in there. No, it's the shortest rod. There's 4 rods in there, so I grabbed the shortest rod. I'll put it in there. Just make sure you've got clearance. I can feel clearance behind there, so I've got plenty of room to go ahead and pull that out. And it should. Now you see here, I'm using an actual impact socket. When I took the nut out, it was an 18 millimeter. I didn't have an 18 millimeter impact socket. You really need to use the impact sockets, not the regular chrome ones, because they could crack or shatter. But here we go. Let's give this a try. This works. Reach back here and make sure I'm not bottoming out. And it seems to be fine. Am I running out of threads here? Oh, I've run out of threads here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back this off and grab the next longer rod. You'll be able to get a good look at this puller. So here's your puller. It's got different length rods over here. So I've got the short one in there now. I can see that the harmonic balancer has pulled off a fair amount over here. It's not all the way out. So I'll go up to the next longer rod. Spin this back out a little bit over here. So this goes back and it hits the crank in the back on the past where the thread engagement is. This thing works pretty nice so far, anyways. I'll rub this in with the impact. Take a little less time here. And the arms swing, but they do swing with just a little bit of stiffness, so it should grab on. I'll actually hold this on the back side over here. Give that a tap. Looks like I'm holding again.
There we are. That worked beautifully. Pull that harmonic balancer off. Okay, so next up, now I gotta get all those bolts off of the timing chain cover. I'm not gonna. That should be pretty straightforward. So I'm not gonna tape all of that. We'll get to the next stage when it comes time to pull some stuff off from around there. Okay, so I've decided to actually go ahead and remove the washer bottle. I would say probably mandatory. You maybe might be able to get away with not doing it and just disconnecting the hose. But in any case, 2 screws, 1 screw here against the fender well, 1 screw here against the fender well, 1 Christmas tree plastic gizmo coming from the air conditioning line. You got a pry out over here. I ran into, wish I had this yesterday because there was a couple of others that I really could have used. Particularly, I think I mentioned in an earlier part of the video about the 2 small hoses next to the heater hoses on the back of the intake manifold. Once again, I ran into another one of these spring type clamps, and a neighbor of mine swung by and gave me this thing, and man, I wish I had this yesterday. But this was a godsend over here, getting this hose connection off of the pipe that goes across up underneath the fuel rails, the coolant pipe. There is sort of a quick disconnect on there, but you need some special tool to get that off as well, from what I can see, because of the way the clips are, or you have to fashion some sort of a zip tie or something to pull that off. I'm a little worried about messing that seal, so I just went with the removing the hose clamp. But in any case, this tool here, you give a squeeze and it locks in and grabs those clamps. I'll kind of demonstrate here a little bit. You just kind of put it on, give it a squeeze, and this is one of the bigger clamps, so it takes a little bit of effort here, but give that a squeeze and it locks in place, and it locks it in a squeeze position. So then you can just kind of manipulate it by hand. That was quite the handy dandy gizmo to get that out of there. So I'll be using this to put all of them back on again, and I think that kind of sums it up for these types. But in any case, so washer bottle removed. That tool, I did see it. You can get it at O'Reilly's. I think it was like $29. So it's got a price tag to it, but I can see me buying one of those for myself. This was a loaner for me. All right, next step of the process over here is getting the motor mount off. So what I did here, if you're working on the ground, you'll just have to deal with having the car on jack stands and then putting the floor jack up under the vehicle. All right, next section we got here. This is the motor side of the motor mount. If you remember, these are the 4. We took these 4 nuts off of here. The motor mount connected to the top of there, and then those were the 3 bolts that I just mentioned. That one of them had a fair amount of Loctite on it. So 3 bolts holding this to the front. 15 millimeter heads on these. Not a lot of frame clearance between this bolt head. And the frame over here on the passenger side. So I was able to get to that, break them free. This fit in there. Oops, just fit in there. My breaker bar with a 15 millimeter socket. I don't have a bolted tent in there, so that falls off on me. So got them broken free. Once I got them broken free, then I ran them out with my ratchet wrench over here. One thing to note, I had heck of a time. 2 of them came right out. There are 3 bolts. 1, 2, 3. Sorry, here we go. So 1, 2, 3. Shorter one to the back. Shorter one to the back over here on this side. 2 longer ones over on this side. Left this bottom one in last, and of course that one didn't want to come out. Struggled to come out because I had a whole bunch of RTV on the back side of it, because this timing chain cover is sealed with RTV.
So obviously it just kind of squished out, got on the bolt, and I couldn't get it out. And there's not enough frame clearance to get this last one out between the frames, so you actually have to take this one out. This one you can just barely swing out. The other one obviously comes out quite easily because it's shorter. But then this last one, you actually have to swing this, get it loosened out, and swing this whole part out, and then it comes out. I wasn't able to get enough frame clearance to just bolt straight out, so I had to get that RTV off of there. Shaved it off with a razor blade from the bottom. And yeah, again, these two bottom bolts, much easier to access from the bottom of the car than the top. I've broken free with the breaker bar and then backed them all out. Actually, plenty of clearance down there from the bottom side if you've got the right tool. All right. All right, I now have all of the bolts out of the timing chain cover. You've got in this area right here, you've got 6 of the longer bolts, and then there are 14 bolts that go around the outer edge. I know that's actually one thing I was kind of digging for, making sure. So as you can see over here, we've got the 6 longer bolts, 14 shorter bolts. Over here on the at the back, way the back on the front of the valve cover area, there is one smaller diameter bolt. It still has a 10 millimeter head, but you know it's a smaller diameter bolt. That one actually is just holding electrical harness over there, but you'll have to remove that one as well. This one doesn't actually play any part in holding the timing chain cover plate on, but it still needs to be removed. So 20 actually bolts that have to come out that are holding the timing chain cover, and one smaller bolt. So these 20 bolts, definitely got to get all those out of there before you start prying. So make sure you count those bolts. See that you have them all off before you start tugging away at the plate so you don't crack it. All right, next thing to note, I've gotten the front timing chain cover popped away. It actually came out pretty darn easy because nobody's ever been in there. I know that some people have a hell of a time sometimes getting them off if they've been off once before, and the previous mechanic went hog wild with the RTV because it really doesn't take much. It's just got to be enough to make a seal, and it's at very little as long as it's done right. But I did notice that I'd taken the hose that goes from this coolant line, from this fitting on the coolant line over to the overflow reservoir. I just took the hose clamp off and took that off. I didn't want to break the seal on this, the O-ring seal, but it's in the way. I can't get the timing chain cover out of the way. So you will need a fuel line removal tool. So I bought the cheap set over here. I would actually suggest getting the better ones, the metal ones that kind of split over. This one's a bit of a pain in the neck to get on there, but it works. This is a 5/8 fuel line removal tool. You got to stick it in there, push it up, separate, and then this fitting pops off. Took a little bit of effort getting it twist off, but I did get it off. So. All right, now I'm going to pull this timing chain cover vertically up and out of here. All right, just pulled the timing chain cover out of there. The only thing to note is I had mentioned just a moment ago to get that fitting off of the water line over here. But in order to get clearance to get the timing chain cover out of here, I had the this air conditioning line over here, between air conditioning line and this variable valve timing thing over here. So it's just 1 5/16 bolt. Just slide this out of here. I'm actually planning on replacing these anyways, just because I'm in here. So in any case, just had to slide that out to get enough clearance to slide the timing chain cover up and out of there. And this is where I'm at. I'm in here now. I'm actually not seeing the play. I did some motor turning, when I was getting that harmonic balancer out of there, so the chain doesn't have the same slop that I had earlier. But yeah, that's still probably a lot more than is acceptable. You see this movement on this timing chain. That's a fair amount of slop on there. So I'm glad I'm going in here and getting this changed out. All right, next thing to mention, I have pulled the Cam Phaser valves off the front. Those just three little screws with the 5/16 bolts on them, long bolts, which exposes the nut which holds on these cam gears, I guess you might say. So now these tools that I purchased on Amazon, I opted for the one that came with this wrench. It's not really a Torx head. I know it's got RT11 on it. I'm not really super familiar with this wrench, but anyways, it fits that specifically for the bolt that holds these on. So make sure when you buy that tool that you get the one with that does include this wrench in it. All right. All right, see now I've got all of the timing chain mechanism off. One thing to keep in mind when you're taking the Cam Phaser guides off, matter of fact, I'll grab one right here. I don't remember if this is the left or right, but in any case, when you're taking these off of the front of the cam, there's an O-ring right here. You may want to get that O-ring. I didn't buy new ones, but I have access to O-rings that I'm just going to go and match up. The pile of them, I don't have the part number of that particular O-ring in case you want to change it, and or these O-rings around here. Probably not a bad idea to get these, though. These are flat O-rings, so they're probably just fine. But in any case, that's one piece of information that I don't have. You may want to look that up. Now, the other thing that I wanted to mention is, you see I've kind of made sort of a cardboard gizmo, some duct tape, and a rag down there. You've probably seen some other videos online, and actually I did see them, and there's just a hellacious amount of water comes out. I tried to evacuate the system as much as I could by, when I was early stages, just draining the fluid, just pumping air into the overflow. But man, just a ton of water still came out of there. So I'm glad I actually made sort of a funnel tucked up underneath there, so all the water came down. I think I got 99% of it, if not more, but a hell of a lot of water came dumping out of there. And I've seen other videos where they just kind of let it fall right into the oil pan, and that just kind of bothers me. I want to try not to get any water at all into the oil pan if I can avoid it. But if you do, again, an oil change after a couple of 100 miles, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea. I may just do that myself anyways. Better safe than sorry. $10 for a filter, $25 for 5 quarts of Motorcraft oil at Walmart is good insurance. One other thing to mention, there's this pipe right here. You'll see it actually, you see it wiggle. It's actually wiggling the all the way over where it hits on the other end over there, where it bolts to the bottom of the manifold. Well, that pipe underneath the fuel rails, there's an O-ring that pops into, basically it's the backside of the water pump. I'm gonna bypass that one because I just don't want to take off all the fuel rails just to get to that O-ring. That O-ring should be just fine. I hope I don't regret it, but I sort of was thinking of it in retrospect. If I needed to, basically, I think the only thing I'd have to do is pull the intake manifold, and the rest of that stuff is still accessible at a later date if it does leak. It's not a major job. It's not a major teardown like you're looking at right here. It's just the intake manifold and then the fuel rails. You're not even going to need to pull the valve covers off if you do need to get to that O-ring. So I'm gonna forego changing that O-ring because I don't want to get into these fuel rails. All right, I am now at the first stages of reassembly. First things first, before I got rid of that cardboard that I was blocking the water with, lo and behold, there was still a fair amount went into the oil pan, so I'm going to wind up having to drain it. So, carefully drain it, blow it out a little bit, and that'll be a little tedious. So maybe that was wasted effort, and you just pull the plug and let it fall through and clean it out afterwards. But tedious work getting the gasket sealer off. Basically just using a razor blade, very gently, very slowly, going all around and scraping away the gasket. Now I'm going to also use some brake parts cleaner on the surface. That stuff evaporates just about instantly, so you don't have to worry about that too much getting into anything. By the time this motor gets all assembled, that stuff will surely evaporate. Make sure you clean that water pump area very, very good, because the RTV can handle some imperfections, but you don't want that water pump. You don't want to have to go back in there because that water pump didn't seal right. Now that looks a little gooey. Actually, I'm probably going to take some gasket cleaner and try and get that off a little bit more, but it is pretty darn smooth. It's actually a lot smoother than it looks. The other thing you'll notice down there, that oil pump, I did install a Melling water pump. While I'm there, that's a really good idea. It's a high volume oil pump. I did change the spring. There's plenty of videos out there on these oil pumps. I went back to stock pressure. It comes with 100 psi spring in it, but there is the 100 psi spring is installed, but I did put in the factory psi 85 psi spring, but it is 20% more volume than the stock pump, and it's a super easy change, just 3 bolts. Some of the straight facing engines are a little bit more tedious because that oil pickup over there is bracketed in, and you got to pry it out, and it's a heck of a time to get it. But this one, you just drop those 2 little 8mm bolts. The pickup drops right down, 3 bolts, and it slides right out. It's a super easy change, just a few minutes. So while you're at it, you might as well give your motors, especially if it's high mileage motors, you'll want that extra flow. You'll want one of these little ratchet wrenches to get those two bolts out of the pickup, 8mm. And that is it. I'm starting the reassembly now. All right, I am now at the first stages of reassembly. First things first, before I got rid of that cardboard that I was blocking the water with, lo and behold, there was still a fair amount went into the oil pan, so I'm going to wind up having to drain it. So, carefully drain it, blow it out a little bit, and that'll be a little tedious. So maybe that was wasted effort, and you just pull the plug and let it fall through and clean it out afterwards. But tedious work getting the gasket sealer off. Basically just using a razor blade, very gently, very slowly, going all around and scraping away the gasket. Now I'm going to also use some brake parts cleaner on the surface. That stuff evaporates just about instantly, so you don't have to worry about that too much getting into anything. By the time this motor gets all assembled, that stuff will surely evaporate. Make sure you clean that water pump area very, very good, because the RTV can handle some imperfections, but you don't want that water pump. You don't want to have to go back in there because that water pump didn't seal right. Now that looks a little gooey. Actually, I'm probably going to take some gasket cleaner and try and get that off a little bit more, but it is pretty darn smooth. It's actually a lot smoother than it looks. The other thing you'll notice down there, that oil pump, I did install a Melling water pump. While I'm there, that's a really good idea. It's a high volume oil pump. I did change the spring. There's plenty of videos out there on these oil pumps. I went back to stock pressure. It comes with 100 psi spring in it, but there is the 100 psi spring is installed, but I did put in the factory psi 85 psi spring, but it is 20% more volume than the stock pump, and it's a super easy change, just 3 bolts. Some of the straight facing engines are a little bit more tedious because that oil pickup over there is bracketed in, and you got to pry it out, and it's a heck of a time to get it. But this one, you just drop those two little 8mm bolts. The pickup drops right down, 3 bolts, and it slides right out. It's super easy change, just a few minutes. So while you're at it, you might as well give your motors, especially if it's high mileage motors, you'll want that extra flow. You'll want one of these little ratchet wrenches to get those two bolts out of the pickup, 8mm. And that is it. I'm starting the reassembly now. All right, next little bit of information. You can see here now, I got everything cleaned up on the front. First step was put the water pump back in. The water pump goes back in, make sure everything's really nice and clean. That, of course, has its own gasket. So I just kind of torqued everything down by hand, little by little by little, snugged everything, go around in a circular pattern. And the torque spec on that, I'm going to share all the torque specs, but 90% of this job over here, the torque spec is 8 foot-pounds for all these bolts that are kind of all over the place. 8 foot-pounds for the water pump, and the next thing to go in were the chain runners on both sides over here, 1 bolt each, also 8 foot-pounds. And then next step after that, now this one's kind of the important trick thing over here. So now you can see, as I mentioned before, I did purchase these cam locator tools. So a little bit daunting, other videos in there, I'm sure, that go over the lining up of the these small chains, mark lined up here, slide it in, new tensioners over here, also 8 foot-pounds. I've got those in there. So now I just finished tightening these. Didn't actually film it, maybe I should, but it was kind of time consuming, so I'll just go to the tips and tricks, I guess you might say. I went on with 30 foot-pounds, so I tightened them all up to 30 foot-pounds, then backed them off completely, then back on to 18 foot-pounds, and that's where the spec kicks in. Back into 18 foot-pounds, and then I got my breaker bar, and from that 18 foot-pounds, you then go around 180 degrees. I was actually a little bit worried about that. It seemed quite daunting, but it seemed about right. It's like you're really cranking down a lug nut, is what it felt like. So now the trick here is these, kind of a big deal to hold things in place. This worked just fine. I did have to hold it down the first time I tried tightening it. It kind of popped up, so I kept one hand on here, for leverage as I was standing over here, and then pulled the breaker bar that 180 degrees to get these tight. But on this back side, that I don't know. I guess it's just the rotation, maybe the height of the flange on the head or whatnot. But this this locator on the back just kind of kept popping off on me, and the cam wants to just settle in, about 90 degrees to the right. And then I tried holding it on with one hand, and the thing was just lifting on me. I knew it wasn't going to work. So that flat is a 7/8 flat. So what you can see what I did here, this is the second one. I left the wrench in place. I got a 7/8 wrench, and I stuck it on there. If you've got a good, typical Craftsman 7/8 wrench, and I just propped it behind this cross member over here. So that kind of held things in place. Now make sure you're kind of holding it over here, because again, you're holding it with your breaker bar, because it's going to kind of want to, as I mentioned, pop over 90 degrees. But then once you've got it settled in over here, that grabs it. So now don't use the chain to then hold the tension for the next one. I know there's probably people out there that have made that mistake, if they don't have the cam locator. So the cam locator tool is supposedly holding both, but I'm sure people have made that mistake also, where it rocks up, it's holding one side, and then they're cranking that 180 degrees, which is a hell of a tension, and they're wind up holding that cam using that chain. You don't want to put all that torque in that chain. So I got the wrench here for that one, and then I did the same thing, flipped the wrench 180 degrees, and it oriented it just about perfect, and rocked it up behind here for this other one. So again, the 7/8 wrench turned one way for one side, flip it around 180 degrees, and it lines up nicely So you can that cross member basically does the holding for you, and then you can pull that breaker bar for that 180 degree spec for torquing these bolts. Again, make sure if you're going to change these or even remove them just to put them back on again, you've got to get new bolts because these bolts do basically stretch into place so that they've yielded into place. So you do not want to reuse those bolts. A couple other things I forgot to mention. If you order these two phaser gears, again, they are stamped. There is an L on this one for left side, and there is an R on this one for right side. So make sure you do not get those backwards. The small gear on the exhaust cam, that one, those are the same both sides, so not to worry. Now the other thing, I know that people make this this mistake. This is not a Torx, and I know I've actually seen a couple of videos out there, instructional videos, talking about just pulling those bolts out with the Torx. Do not do that. You risk stripping the bolts out, and then you got to get new cams. So make sure you get the right wrench. This wrench, there's other videos that say what it is. I think it's a TM 55. I think it is. I don't know why this says RT11, but it came with my cam holder tools. Again, I think I might have mentioned that earlier in the video, but again, it was part of the kit, so it just came. Luckily, because I wouldn't have known. I would have thought it was a Torx, and I would have made that error. It came with these locating blocks. All right, I got my I guess you might say the main timing chain kind of in place. So this guide first. These two are already, of course, already on. This guide first. I didn't put this guide, the tensioner guide, on until just before putting the chain. Actually, I already had the chain on, and then I slipped this into place. Important thing to note: get your timing marks right. So hopefully this will be in focus. It's not really focusing, but tap on that. Okay, so you got your timing mark right here. That happens to be a copper one. I don't know if they're always the same. Timing mark right over there. So start with these two on the top. So you can start off with a lot of slack over here because, of course, the water pump is. I can focus. The water pump, of course, is an idler, so that'll just kind of spin. And you can get these two. So one thing I did have to do in order to get them kind of lined up is I did leave this timing holder in place, and then I grabbed my 7/8 wrench and I kind of held it and I massaged it a little bit so that I could, I had plenty of slack down here by the water pump, but concentrated on getting this timing mark where it needed to be, and then snugged everything back up, and now pulled everything back in, and then that dropped right where it needed to be. Then dropping down to the crankshaft, put my new crankshaft gear on. Now you'll notice that's pretty helpful little trick. So maybe you'll want to use that one as well. I got one of those real small one of those ball type bungee cords, and that helped. I was able to get the timing mark located, and then just put that bungee cord on it to hold things in place. So there is what your timing mark needs to look like down here. It's got to be right in between, and there's my little bungee holding things in place. Again, now to get my gear to line up down there, what I wound up doing is actually then leaving this cam holder in place, and I took this one off, and I just bumped this just a little bit back and forth in order to get my timing mark down on the crankshaft right where I needed it to be. So now last thing, then of course I slid this into place. You got to start at the top, slide it in. Now I'm ready to go ahead and put my tensioner in place, torque it down, and then pop the pin. But before I pop the pin, I'm going to double and triple check my timing mark again, make sure everything's kosher, and then that'll be it for this portion. All right, next thing to note for getting the tensioner into place to make things easier. Again, double checked all of my timing marks. And then what I did is I left this cam tool again, and one more time used my 7/8 wrench. I went ahead and I popped off this timing tool and took, you know, now you're tied in and this side's locked to this side. So I went ahead and pushed this cam counterclockwise in order to move as much slack as I can over onto this side where the tensioner is. That gives you, you know, nice full complete access to get this this tensioner into place without struggling for space, because if you don't have plenty of slack on there, you're going to fight to get it in there. Now I've got my little bungee on there. I'm going to pull that bungee off. Heck, if I have to, I'll cut it. And or what I could do, I've got my tool on the other side. Let me pull some slack over to this side now. Just so I have, let's see, how am I going to do this? I'm going to tug it that way just a little bit. See that? That gave me the slack on this side to put it in. I'll just give that a little tug back. Got my tool back in again. Okay, check my timing mark here. Looks good. Check my timing mark there. Looks good. So now I pulled off my elastic band, so I want to make sure that everything's still kosher on the bottom over here. That looks good. Guides in place. Everything looks good. That's where it needs to be. And all right, that should be it. So I'm going to pull the pin. And I believe that is, it's got a hydraulic port behind it. So there's a spring and a hydraulic port, because you'll notice that lines up with a hole, so that'll snug up as soon as you get some oil in the engine. And our timing chain is in place. Now onto the next part of the assembly. All right, another thing to note here, these I guess we'll call them Cam Phaser manifolds, the Cam Phaser solenoid. I am replacing these. You could replace those by just pulling the valve covers. I don't know that there's anything wrong with mine, but I'm just changing them just because I'm in here. The one thing I want to note, though, there is a little O-ring over here. I did not get the Ford O-ring, but I did measure it. It's a 2mm by 13mm O-ring, so it's a 2mm thickness, 13mm ID. There are seals on here. This is the one that goes inside the Cam Phaser itself. This is basically like a ring kind of seal, but the phaser rotates. I'm not changing those. They should be fine. That is about it for these. I'm going to bolt these on. You got to slide the bolts in here before you bring it down there, because the bolts will not slide all the way out. They'll bump up against the frame, so I've got to kind of put them in place. Just be careful not to drop that O-ring on the way in. Okay, another little trick, I guess you might say I noticed. I just got done mentioning the O-rings on those Cam Phaser solenoid assemblies. And what I just did is I had them both on, and as soon as I got them both on, I realized, you know what? I'm not going to be able to gain access to put the RTV properly on the back over there. So I took that rear unit back off again just so I can get access to put the RTV over there, and then I'll put this back on again. So I'm ready to go, and I'm going to put the RTV on. I did purchase this, I guess you might call it squeeze cheese RTV at O'Reilly's. I'm going to give this a shot. They have this Permatex Ultra Black. That's what I'm going to use. I think I'll have a better time of it than trying to just use a regular tube. So this will be my first shot with this stuff. Our next step is putting the everything's cleaned up, and now it was just time to put on the RTV. So now I got this Ultra Black Permatex over here. Now you'll notice what I did is I got a little piece of vinyl hose. That is key to getting where you need to get, putting the RTV all around on the block. Notice I actually haven't put the Cam Phaser solenoids on because those are kind of in the way they block access for getting the RTV in place. Now you also might ask is, well, why not put the RTV on the timing cover plate, on the back of the timing cover plate? And you'll kind of know right away when you're taking it out for the first time that it's just not that easy to wiggle it around. You'll bang it around and whatnot and touch here and touch there and all over the place. And there's just going to be no way to keep the RTV bead clean, getting it back in there again. So you got to put it on the block. And I would also suggest before you put the RTV on there that you give a couple of dry runs so that you know what it feels like to get that slid right onto place on the alignment pins over the crankshaft and whatnot. Because it's a little wonky, but once you do it a couple times, you'll feel good at it. Because you don't want to just go for it the first time because you might just mess up that RTV bead, and you sure as heck don't want to get back in here and do this again just because you got an oil leak. All right. All right, next tip that I want to hand out is to get the cover back in, actually to get the timing chain cover out, as well as getting it back in. I had actually forgotten and I put it in, but these air conditioning lines, kind of between the air conditioning lines and the Cam Phaser gears, things are really snug, and just removing the right side Cam Phaser solenoid will give you just enough room. It'll give you that room that you need in order to get that cover slipped in. So got everything basically finger type button together. The instructions on that Permatex are to apply it, assemble right away, wait an hour, and then torque things down, and then wait 24 hours before you put fluids in. So I'm going to have at least that much time before I get around to getting fluids in, so I should be just fine. Another little trick here. Again, I'm going to review a little bit. I think I mentioned this earlier in the video as well, but make sure one thing that helps for getting the motor and getting the crank to where you need it to be. And while you're in here, you might as well do the same thing I'm doing. I am going to change all the spark plugs. I got 180,000 on here. I think I've got about 80,000 on these new spark plugs. But what I did is I removed all the spark plugs. Now, until I'm ready to change them, I'm actually leaving them in a hole, basically letting them block the hole. But I had them completely unscrewed and just laying down in this recess. But as you can see, 5/8 socket for the spark plugs. They're 5/8 socket, but I don't actually have one of those special spark plug socket wrenches, so I just use a piece of 3/8 hose to grab my spark plugs, and I also actually use them to put them gently in there, and basically just give them a turn or two to get them engaged in there, and then pop the hose back off again. But again, while I was until I'm ready to put the new plugs in, I've got them completely loosened up all the way, so they are not holding any compression.
All right, next little bit of information. Putting the motor mount bracket back onto the front timing chain cover. There are 3 bolts. This one over here on the left side is the shortest bolt. Essentially what you need to do is leave that bolt out. Get the motor mount mostly into place. While you're holding the motor mount with one hand, go ahead and sort of rock the 2 longer bolts, the one on this side and the one down lower, into the holes. You'll have to sort of cant it a little bit because there's not enough room between the timing chain cover and the frame over here in order to just put it in place and then slide the bolts in. So with that left bolt out of there, it gives you enough room to sort of cant this motor mount, slide it up into place, get these 2 longer bolts started, and then you can go back in and put this left bolt into place, and all that happens from the top side. All right, I'm at the final stages of torquing everything down. Started off going around and putting all of the timing chain bolts in. Obviously put them in with the Permatex. It said put everything in hand tight. I did everything just snugged everything just a smidge. Waited an hour as the instructions said, and then I came back out and I started torquing everything. So went around first, torqued all of the timing cover bolts to 89 inch-pounds, kind of like all these other little 5/16 bolts were. Then put the motor mount on, snugged the motor mount down. There actually is a torque spec, but I didn't follow it too closely I just snugged it again. But the correct spec for the motor mount bolts is initially 133 inch-pounds. Then go back around and snug all of the timing chain cover bolts to 177 foot-pounds, and then go back to the 3 motor mount bolts, tighten them to 22 foot-pounds plus 90 degrees. So I did that, and now the last stage that I have to do is tighten the timing chain bolts. Once again, they're at 177 inch-pounds, and now I've got to go an additional 45 degrees. And then I'm done torquing everything down here. I'll put that all in the description so that you have a chart to go by, but that was the procedure. Basically snug everything a certain amount, then go back in and then do the torque spec.
All right, next important piece of information here. Getting the harmonic balancer back on again. This harmonic balancer is a little bit different than the ones that I've dealt with over the years on some older style vehicles where the harmonic balancer has a bit more taper to it. This is more of a full-length press fit, I guess you might call it. So I finagled with this for probably over an hour yesterday, trying to get the darn thing on, and no luck. So I went to O'Reilly's today, and I grabbed this harmonic balancer installer tool. So now got this in. I'm not crazy about how it didn't really grab as many threads as I would have liked it to, but it's got a bunch in there enough. And I mean, you can do this with a piece of all thread and probably a piece of all thread and a nut and a couple of washers. But this device here actually has a ball bearing thrust washer here, which it's just going to be less stressful on those threads. For pulling this thing into place. So I'm doing this one real time. I haven't done a hell of a lot of stuff real time here for you guys because I think it's kind of just going along, but I figured for this one I might as well go ahead and show it in real time. Not too terrible. Just a little awkward with the camera in the way. Trying to hold this little 9/16 wrench while I'm turning this big adjustable. But it appears to be going on without too terribly much effort. So now when I'm done, this goes to, I think, again, I'll just publish this torque specs. I think it's 36 foot-pounds plus 90 degrees. Now, another thing to make note of is you don't want to just, unless you've got some way to hang on to the harmonic balancer some other way, I would suggest getting this tool. Now this one, this is a harmonic balancer holder, so that basically it holds in there with a socket drive, so that I can hold it and then put that force on there. It's going to be quite a bit of force. You don't want to mess with the harmonic balancer or put excessive tension on the chains in order to put all that force on there. You want to actually hold the ID while you're turning the ID, and this is the best way to do it. This tool is $29 at AutoZone. It was actually Oddly's exact same brand and everything, and it was 29 versus 49 over. Normally I do a lot of my purchases at O'Reilly's, but this was cheaper at AutoZone. So, and this harmonic balancer installer tool is available to borrow at both O'Reilly's and AutoZone. So this is going well. I'm going to go ahead and finish this off, and then I'm going to use the tool I just showed you to go ahead and torque down the harmonic balancer, and this section will be done. So actually, before I finish off, I mean, you can see how quickly and easily I got this pretty much just about all the way in. And like I said, I wasted at least an hour yesterday just trying to finagle it on another way with some, bolts that I had and whatnot. And it just wasn't going. It just slipped right on now with this tool. Here's a picture or video of that, a shot of the Harmonic Balancer tool that I got from O'Reilly's, the EverTough 6006. Of all the tools, the Harmonic Balancer Puller, which they claim is Chrysler, but it works perfect on the Ford, and this tool are crucial for this job. The timing holding tool, which I mentioned, that I have, that's this one. I got this one on Amazon. This one is, almost kind of optional, but I really wouldn't suggest doing the job without it. What is crucial, what came with the tool, is this TM, I guess they call it. Again, not a Torx. It looks like a Torx, but it is not a Torx. So use the right tool, or you very well run the risk of stripping out the bolts that hold your cam phasers on. On this tool, it was the M12 by 1.5 that fits into the Harmonic Balancer to pull it on. All right. Okay, last step of taking care of the torque converter. Got it already preloaded to the 37 foot-pounds. Used the puller to get it all the way under till the puller was nice and snug. Then did the 37 foot-pounds. As you can see, I've used that tool over there, and I've stuck my other 1/2-inch drive ratchet in there, and I've got it sort of held up against the spindle over there, or the drive axle. And now the torque spec says I've got to go another 90. So got it held over there. Now I'm going to give it another 90, which is going to be a hell of a torque. There we go, that's 90. All right. Quite easy. Now just pull the tool out of there. Harmonic balancer's all on. Put the belt on. On to the next step. All right, the next step for me is to put the valve covers on. So since that's the next step and I'm going to cover everything up, I'm going to go ahead. I know I've got some water down in the pan. I've got the drain plug on because I didn't want that just flowing out all over the place. I had the floor jack up underneath the engine holding it, and I didn't want that just kind of flowing all over the place. So I know I've got some water in there still. So this is going to be essentially sacrificial oil, but I'm going to pour a good bit of oil right over the top of all this stuff over here. Probably a couple of quarts, and I'm just going to sacrifice over here just to get it to sort of run down the chain and run over the chain tensioners. I'll pour some over this chain tensioner, over this chain over here. Careful not to dump any right onto the electrical plug-in of your solenoid over here, but just going to kind of blow some over there. I don't know, it's really all that necessary, but I think it can't hurt. So, and then it'll give me some more oil in there to sort of, flush out the water that sort of dribbled into the pan when I was getting that water pump out of there. So.
I'm in the process now of installing and torquing down the, I guess you might say, passenger side, so that would be the right valve cover. There is the torque specs. Actually, I pulled up these torque specs from a lot of the torque specs I pulled up from ford-specs.com, and pretty much all of them made sense except for they have a spec and it repeats on a couple of other websites, so I think they're at fault actually here, where they say to torque the valve cover gasket, or valve covers, to valve cover torque specs 15 foot-pounds plus 45 degrees, and then in another spot It says Taurus valve cover torque specs 15 foot-pounds plus 180 degrees. That's nuts. There's no way, absolutely no way, those bolts are going to hold that kind of torque. So be careful when you, if you look up these torque specs. Make sure you don't get any that are ridiculous. Those are absolutely ridiculous. These are 89 foot-pounds, just like all the other little ones. I could potentially foresee maybe they made some sort of a screw up that 45 degrees might be added to the 89 foot-pounds. I don't even think that's necessary because these are all rubber mounted, so I'm going 89 foot-pounds on these. Sorry, inch pounds, not foot-pounds, inch pounds. Correction, inch pounds, 89 inch pounds. That's about 7 foot-pounds.
Okay, last piece of information to know. I've already started the car to make sure everything was good before doing this. Started everything up, and no check engine lights. Everything's great, and the engine is so much smoother than it was. A noticeable difference as soon as it started up. It just had a completely different sound with this new timing chain. But one thing that I did do, I cycled the motor without starting it for about 15 seconds, then let it sit for a minute, and then about another 15-20 seconds again with just the starter, making sure that the engine doesn't start. In order to do that, you press brake and put the gas pedal to the floor while you push the button, and the starter will turn over, but the engine will not start. All right. So do that a couple of times just to get oil up into the motor for the very first time, and you should be good to go. Now I'm going to just start it normal.